we're back with part 2 of my fairy tale tag. On to question 6. In terms of fairy tales on film, what are some of your favourites? Okay, well, in terms of the more straightforward fairy tale adaptations of film, one of the more, I guess, fun ones that, of course, you know I love because I did its own video review, is Ever After, Drew Barrymore. Bloody love that because it becomes its own story, and I think that's great. Also, I very much like, in terms of the more adult version, excuse me, I really, really love In the Company of Wolves, which is the 80s film that is based on Angela Carter's retellings. They're kind of retellings, but they're kind of their own original stories, that was in her anthology, The Bloody Chamber. And the 3 stories adapted into the film In the Company of Wolves, and it's really dark and messed up, and you'll never see Angela Lansbury the same way. In fact, I strongly encourage you to watch Beauty and the Beast. No. Watch In the Company of Wolves, and then watch Disney's Beauty and the Beast, and try and view Angela Lansbury as Mrs. Potts, and it won't work. So yeah, In the Company of Wolves is really good, and Ever After is hands down one of my favourites. Favorite fairy tales on film, easily. And then Disney is Beauty and the Beast by far. #1 with a bullet. Question number 7. What fairy tale-esque feeling films and novels have you enjoyed that don't strictly fit canon? Now, Dawn was asking me, Renee, what do you mean by fairy tale canon? What fits in fairy tale canon? And I guess my interpretation of it is sort of anything that's at least 100 years old and was written as a fairy tale. So we have what we interpret as being modern fairy tales, stuff like The Wizard of Oz, stuff like the Narnia series. Maybe one day Harry Potter will be that, but it's kind of a hero journey story more so. Yeah, so kind of anything at least 100 years old, I think, is probably what I would say. But, you know, like Oscar Wilde's fairy tales, I think, fit in there as part of the canon. But, you know, you've got your standard stuff like the Grimms and Perrault and Hans Christian Andersen, and then all the other stuff, like all the things from 1001 Nights, like the Arabian stories, stuff like Aladdin and that kind of thing, they all fit into. Excuse me, I'm like coughing crazy. I'm just working with the fairy tales I know, I should say, so I'm not trying to be racist or stereotype culturally in terms of these fairy tales. I'm just working with what I know. So, fairy tale feeling films and novels I've read and really enjoyed. One would be, recently, was John Connolly's The Book of Lost Things, because it does incorporate some canon fairy tales, but it becomes its own thing, and it introduces its own characters as well, and has its own storyline going. So I think that kind of counts. One that really stuck with me, and it's so many things I don't know what the hell you would actually say, but the little girl who was too fond of matches had a real strong fairy tale feel to it, even though it's very dark and messed up. It's got it's several genres, that book, but there was a strong fairy tale feel. To me, at least, it permeated through the story. Movies, certainly Penelope with Christina Ricci in it. I don't know if maybe that is based on a tale, but I think it's kind of, you know, like the notion of the Beauty and the Beast kind of story going on there. Certainly Pan's Labyrinth, the Spanish film. It incorporates a lot of folklore and mythology in it, but it's its own tale. And then something like Jim Henson's Labyrinth, which has a lot of allusions and homages to really well-known stories and tales, but again is its own story. So they're just some I thought of. Question number 8. What do you think accounts for the enduring appeal of fairy tales? Well, I think it's essentially it comes down to two strong things, and these are 2 strong reasons that people like fairy tales, and you can stand on either side of these, I guess. It depends on what your tastes are. I think there's the lighter side of it, where you have the notion of wish fulfillment and the idea of you get, like, it's a dreamlike thing that you can attain from these stories, where, you know, you're reading about people who get the prince, who fall in love, who get riches, they go from rags to riches, they get themselves out of really horrible circumstances and situations into something great and positive. They're able to accomplish the things they want and gain what they need in life. And so there's that idea of escapism, but the notion of hope, like it imbues a great deal of hope in you, especially when you're young, the idea of getting everything that you want, and often with a magical quality to it. You attain it by something magical and otherworldly, which, you know, just adds flavour and excitement to the tale. So there's that side of things where it's dreamlike, and it's the kind of the beauty of it, of getting what you want. It's also the kind of clear black and white idea of good versus evil, so it gives like this moral clarity to it, which can be very appealing when you know, the good are punished and the good are rewarded and the bad are punished, and you know, there's that kind of clarity that can come across, and so that can be really beneficial, especially when you're young. But it can be appealing when you're older too, and life is just too complex and too grey, and yeah, everything is too ambiguous, and you like the idea of turning to something where things are simpler and more straightforward. So there's all that side of things. And then on the other side, I think there's the notion of there's just so much you can explore and discuss and get away with discussing and encountering and portraying in fairy tales that you don't realise immediately, and you probably can't discuss as openly and yet subtly as fairy tales are able to do. You can cover all manner of really questionable graphic content in a fairy tale and get away with it, and you can explore really dark, really tricky subject matter. So there's the emotional and psychological and mental appeal, I think, of looking into a fairy tale and examining it and taking it apart in that way, and seeing what you can learn and grasp, and the questions it raises and the things it makes you think about. So there's the more adult way of seeing a fairy tale, and the fact that because it carries really basic life lessons and depicts really basic human emotions and needs and desires and conflict. So there's the psychological side of it, and there's the I don't know, the emotional side of it, where you're connecting to things and it makes you feel, and it makes you wish, and it makes you hope, and it makes you dream. And over here it makes you examine, it makes you ponder, it makes you question. So I think both those things are why they're sticking around, and they just have really, the core of it is they have really clear-cut character types and personality types that you can work with, so you can adapt them, and they can always change, and they're adaptable to a million different cultures and any time period, and they just work. They can then persist, and you can move them about, and they're flexible, and yeah. So as a narrative, it can work very easily and evolve in that way, and yeah, I don't know what I'm saying. Question number 9. Was there a character or fairy tale that impacted you the most, or still impacts you the most? One that I always connected with, especially when I was young, was Thumbelina, because she was isolated and put upon and felt very, very apart and separate from everybody else because of her height, but it was just this feeling of isolation and loneliness and feeling different from everybody else. I mean, that can, you know, that's a thing that goes through a lot of tales, like the Ugly Duckling, for example. And yeah, but Thumbelina I remember especially I connected to when I was a kid, and I still do, you know. I mean, I'm a very short person anyway, but just on a superficial level, I was always told I looked different, and I looked unappealing and stuff, so I felt very alone a lot of the time, and so I could very much empathise with Thumbelina. Question number 10. If you could be any fairy tale character for a day, who would you be and why? Well, going back to my answering video number 1 about the Sea Witch, I would really like to be her for a day, just to understand what's going on in her head, to get to examine the kind of life she leads. I would love to know what her backstory is and how she came to be a sea witch, how she was banished from the kingdom, why she can't live with everybody else, how she came upon, was she born with magic, did she learn it, was it a craft she studied and practiced at? I would just like to be her for a day because I find her very intriguing. I wouldn't want to be her for more than a day though, because I think her job would be very burdensome and would really take a toll on you emotionally, and I wouldn't want to do it for more than a day. But I'd just like to be her, and hopefully in that job for that one day I could offer some good advice and try and lead people along the right path if they came to me for help. Question number 11. If you could rewrite or re-envision a fairy tale, which would it be and why? I have no plans to re-envision a fairy tale, but I would, as I said, really love to see a book from the Sea Witch's point of view. We have had so many other stories where it's been from the villain's point of view, or it's, you know, taken that slant of perspective and point of view on it. I'd really like to see a book about the Sea Witch. Even if it had nothing to do with Little Mermaid, just the Sea Witch, I would really like to see her story. Someone write it, because I'm not gonna. Question number 12, the final question: what would your weapon of choice be if you were a villain? Poison apple, the power of a name, an evil bargain, or preying on human emotion. All of those are good things to do, I think, and effective, and kind of appeal to the desire and weakness in human beings as coming to your aid for your evil doings. But I think there's something really freaky and spooky about the power of a name. It's such a simple thing to mess up on and to give away without realizing, so I think that's why it would be quite an evil trick, quite a simple and very easy trick to do on somebody, because you could give away a name, mention a name, without realizing it, and it would be such a very easy trap for someone to fall into that you could then use to your advantage. And yeah, it's just something so freaky about something as simple as a name being a really powerful tool to undo you, and I think that's just, yeah, I find that really powerful. So that would probably be my weapon of choice. So I'm with Rumpelstiltskin on that one. So that was the second part of my fairy tale tag. I'm going to have to go. It's probably too long. So thanks everyone. Please do your responses and have fun. Goodbye.